Welcome to the webinar of Decoding the WSET Level 4 Specification. I'm Gus. I've been teaching WSET for the past 10 years. And in the past 5 years, I've been a tutor for the WSET online classroom, tutoring global diploma students. So I hope I can share some information about how to decode this specification and help you with your study and your exams. So first of all, I have to say, I've been teaching for other institutes, including the WSET online classroom for the past 10 years. But me, by myself, I am not a WSET program provider, meaning I can spend some time focusing on the things and the materials that we have for our study and for our exams. And I found out that actually the free-for-all documents, especially for the specification, is very useful as a guidance to your study. But many people ignore these kind of documents. So today I want to emphasize on the importance of them. All right, these are free-for-all documents, especially specification. Please read them. All right, so today we have two questions to answer. The first question I want to discuss is actually, why do many people fail or quit? The second, of course, is the main part for today's webinar, is how to decode the level 4 diploma specification. So why do people fail or quit? All right, we probably see lots of the glamorous side of diploma, such as we watch the graduation ceremony at the Guildhall in London, very good, or certain people got diploma and their salary become better, all these kind of things. But actually, lots of people fail or quit. Okay, I don't have the data, but in the typical session in the online classroom that I taught in the past, at least almost half of the people, they just disappeared. Okay, so it is a difficult program to complete for a lot of people, but I don't want to see that, because we spend so much time, we spend so much money, and we want to become better, and we want to learn more about wines, right? At the diploma level, if you're not sure, oh, do I like wine? Do I want to learn about wine? Please do not do this program. I believe everybody loves wine so much, loves wine learning so much, okay? Whether you're a consumer or you're working in the wine industry, you love this product, and that's why we learn it. Okay, so why do people fail or quit? Well, people will say, oh, it's hard to balance life, work, and study, and this kind of certification will not guarantee my paycheck will become better. Or lots of people said to me, I don't know what to expect in the exam, or I feel overwhelmed during studies, right? There's a lot of things to study. I'm just putting my personal opinion over here, all right? Personally, I think these are valid reasons depending on each of us, right? Each of us is different. We have different life and work and difficulties in life and all that. But personally, I consider the fundamental problem is we ignore this line in the specification, or even before you register for the diploma program. In the specification, it says for entry onto the level 4 diploma in wines, candidates must hold either the level 3 award in wine or the level 3 award in wines and spirits. Well, lots of people do not treat this line seriously. WSET forces you to do level 3 first, and then move on to diploma for a reason. the first thing I want to emphasize on today is if you actually treat level 3 foundation knowledge and skills seriously, you will spend much less time in your diploma study. And even if some little difficult things happening in your life, or if you found a lot of things to study and all that, having those kind of feelings, if you actually learn level 3 very well, you will be much less worried. And if you actually when you look at the textbook nowadays for diploma, you will feel less overwhelmed if you have the foundations of level 3 very, very well. Okay, so with my 10 years of teaching experience, I want to say lots of people ignore the importance of WSET level 3. I will give you examples. So for the level 3 foundations, there's a case study. Nowadays, if you look at the level 4 specification, it requires 372 hours in average for your private self-studies. Okay, everybody, if you just look at this, you might get scared because that's a lot of time. You need to devote a lot in your studies. Okay, however, okay, I'll give you an example of me. Gus, me, I studied at most 100 hours on my own when I was studying my diploma. Well, that was back in 2012, 2013, 14, okay? But how did I pass it? I'm not joking here, okay? I passed diploma by teaching WSET level 2. Not even level 3, because you are not allowed to teach level 3 if you do not hold the diploma qualification, okay? I was teaching WSET at level 2 in China, almost every month or every 2 months. By teaching WSET level 2, I have to force myself to learn the foundations so well, so that when I deal with level 3, and of course, the WSET diploma problems during my study and during exam, I have all the foundations to guide me to think about things correctly and to put down lots of great foundation information in the exam. Okay, that's my weird level 2 experience, level 4 experience. But this is if you think about these kind of things in your daily life. Okay, if you want to attend a race, if you just shoot for 3 miles, okay, you run and run and run and run for 3 miles in the competition, in the race, okay, you practice that 3 miles or about 5 kilometers again and again and again and again. You master the 5 kilometers running. It will help you tremendously during your 15 kilometers race in the future. If you jump into the 15-kilometer race first, you will find it overwhelming and you'll find it pretty difficult. Okay? You do not run before you can walk, as our parents told us. I'll give you a real example in the level 3 and in the level 4, the transition, okay? In level 3, what you need to know about Alsace Vendange Tardive VT style Pinot Gris? Well, the level 3 textbook and in your level 3 studies, you should already know about the style as described in the WSET way and the general quality of these wines. Okay, pretty high quality of these wines, right? And in your level 3 study, you should already know the growing environment for these kind of style of wines. And how do you harvest them? And how do you execute the wine making step by step of these wines? When you study level 4, you should already have these kind of knowledge. And I tell you what, you do not need to learn much more in level 4. The only thing you want to think more in level 4 is the market information or wine business information of wines like this. Okay, so if you actually master level 3, you do not even need to study much about Alsace, Vendange Tardif style Pinot Gris, Gewurz, or Riesling. Okay, in level 4, the only thing you need to do more is to think and to study as they expected. And where do we find this information to guide us? Well, let's decode the level 4 diploma specification, because the specification tells us what do they expect in terms of what you should learn and what you should do in the exams. Okay, so first of all, tasting. I'm only going to do one slide on tasting because there's no way that I can solve all the tasting problem over here in this kind of webinar, right? For tasting, you have to do tasting trainings, daily trainings, ideally. So the only thing I want to say about the tasting part is you want to think about the rules as they set up, okay? So if you look at the SAT tasting system, actually it's very similar in between level 3 and the level 4 for the descriptive part. The only difference nowadays in between level 3 and level 2 in terms of descriptive part would be the tannin part. Okay, for red wines, for diploma, you not only need to comment on the tannin level, but also you need to comment on the tannin nature. And also for the flavor characteristics, in level 3, there are 3 marks, and in level 4, there are 4 marks. And that's about it. Okay, they are very, very similar. So you want to do level 3 tasting first, and then you do level 4. But I believe everybody should do level 3, right? You must do level 3 before doing diploma. Now, the other thing is, in the diploma exams, there's a focus on the quality and the aging potential, suitability for aging. Okay, so in your level 4, you also want to practice on the quality and the suitability for bottle aging part in your daily tastings. Again, I cannot solve this kind of problem without tasting these wines with you guys. Okay, this is just to let you understand what they are expecting in the diploma. So my recommendation is that you look at their tasting list, or during your course studies, when you actually do in-person class, focus on the wine style, descriptive notes, and also focus on how you structure the qualities, the conclusion part. Okay, if you do not have the chance of doing in-person class, you do it online, please buy samples by contrasting samples. For example, very basic quality, acceptable quality versus very outstanding quality in the same category. Taste and compare them. But one thing I want to emphasize in this webinar is, again, you want to master the styles and qualities as recommended in level 3 first. And then you taste level 4 stuff. And there are lots of overlaps. If you actually compare the suggested wine list of level 3 and the level 4, they are quite similar in terms of those kind of classic styles and classic wines. you want to know very well about the classics in the level 3 recommended list first, okay? And you taste a lot of them. Stick to the classics. Do not move on to Greco di Tufo before you know the differences in between Chablis and California unoaked Chardonnays. All right? And of course, you have to use the WSET system, the SAT. Okay, that I'm not gonna talk too much because there's a rule over there, you follow them. More importantly, the theory. Especially for the new diploma, the way they structure the theory is, if you look at the specification, you learn D1, wine production first. You pass the exams of D1, wine production, and D2, wine business first. And then you apply those skills and knowledge you learned into the following units, D3, D4, D5, and D6. However, I want to add this kind of hidden rule over here, okay? You must pass level 3 before moving on to level 4. So the foundations are not only just D1 and D2. You have to have level 3 foundations as well and use them as the absolute foundations for your D3, D4, D5, and D6 studies. And the level 3 is actually also a good foundation for D1 as well. For D2 wine business, we do need to sort of learn more about it. I'm going to talk about it later. Okay, so this is the first thing, is that pay attention to this kind of theory structure, especially for the new diploma system. All right, then if you read the specification, there are certain headings. And these headings, okay, there are certain things that they repeat a lot. They always, if you pay attention to the headings, they always put these terms as headings first, and then list the amount of knowledge you need to learn in the specification. These are the learning outcome, and then the assessment criteria. Okay, shall I repeat again? The learning outcome and assessment criteria. And that is our focus today. Why they are important? Because I always ask students in my in-person class, I say, okay, I'm Chinese, I'm not English speaker. You guys are English speakers. Okay, most of you guys are native English speakers. Tell me what's the meaning in English of learning outcomes and assessment criteria. Okay, I'm just putting down the definition of these terms I can find online. Okay, learning outcomes are statements that describe the knowledge or skills that students should acquire by the end of a particular assignment, class, course programs, and to help students understand why that knowledge and skills will be useful to them. So in diploma, if you read the learning outcome, you are reading the things that they expect you to take away from the diploma program. Okay, so they put down the things they are expecting here. For example, they expect you to understand what the vine requires to produce and ripen grapes for wine production, and how the growing environment influences the vine's ability to produce and ripen grapes. They expect you to understand the grape growing options and they expect you to understand the winemaking options and how they influence the style, quality, and price of the wines. Here's one thing I want to emphasize. I've emphasized in the level 3 specification webinar. I want to emphasize again over here in this webinar, okay? For some reason, probably due to the education systems that we have in non-British education system countries, okay, such as China, Korea, Japan, USA, lots of countries. If it is not a British way, okay, those kind of British style of education, okay, what do I mean by that? British style of education is the teacher will not give you, oh, you should study this, this, and that, and the exam will give you this, this, and that. The teachers will tell you, okay, this is what we sort of expect in the exam. And you just study your textbook, and if you have any questions, ask me, okay? And in the exam, you apply those knowledge. But for some reason, in the wine world, at least as far as I can see, people always jump into memorization first. Of course, we naturally need to memorize things first, right? Because there's no way we can move on before knowing the very basics, such as Chablis is Chardonnay, Sancerre is Sauvignon Blanc. But you are level 4 now. What they are expecting is really not just about memorization. It's understanding stuff. So in your studies, you need to ask yourself, do I understand these points? For example, I mentioned in level 3, you should already know Alsace, Pinot Gris, Vendange Tardif, right? Before you move on to learn level 4, you need to understand what that Vendange Tardif, the VT style is. Do not move on to level 4 if you don't understand that the VT is not always sweet. Vendange Tardif just means late harvest. But when you actually make wine, you can make a drier or sweeter style by using the late harvest grape, depending on the winemaker's choices. VT just means late harvest. You understand the implications behind Vendange Tardif during or even before your diploma learning. All right, more importantly, let's look at assessment criteria. Again, I put a definition over here, okay? This definition I found online. It says, assessment criteria are the things that what you're expected to do to demonstrate achievement of the learning outcomes and the factors instructors will take into account when making judgments about students or your performance. In my translation, it's exactly what they are expecting you to do in the exams to express what you've learned. These are what you will be tested in the exams. Okay, that is why these assessment criteria are very important. You need to understand them. So now let's decode them. Okay, this is just a rough example I'm showing over here. If you read these assessment criteria, they never say memorize the anatomy of wine or memorize the components of grapes. Okay, they say describe, explain, 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 and in lots of cases, they also say you need to evaluate or compare, etc., etc. Okay, let's do the sort of 1 unit by 1 unit. Okay, I'm not describing all of them, but I'll just give you examples unit by unit. Let's look at D1 wine production. Okay, on page 7 of the specification, okay, it says, okay, you sort of need to learn about these kind of things, like anatomy of the wines, the composition of the grape, the sunlight, the soil, blah, 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 blah. And then one of them, it says yield per vine or yield per unit area. In D1 studies, I often receive students' messages online, just says, oh, do we need to memorize all the maximum permitted yields in many classic wine regions? Okay, such as, oh, Sauterne, what is the maximum permitted yield? What's the number? Do I need to memorize all of them? The answer is not necessarily. And the answer to myself, because I'm kind of lazy style during my study. So the answer to myself is that I want to read the assessment criteria and think about, do I need to memorize all these kind of numbers? Here we go. Okay, the headings before they even put out this yield per vine, yield per unit area, the headings are, the assessment criteria are, explain how vineyard management options related to the growing environment. Or they say, explain how vineyard management options influence the production and the ripening of the grapes. Let's stop there, okay? If you think about these kind of criteria, we're looking at the yield over here. First of all, they didn't ask you to memorize the typical or maximum permitted yields in certain regions. What you need to do is to use the information of those kind of certain yields in the typical region in your textbook to explain how those kind of vineyard management options related to the growing environment and the production and the ripening of the grapes. Meaning, if you say, think about regions like Sauterne, okay? You look at the numbers like Chateau Yquem is even as low as less than 10 hectoliters per hectare, or you can translate to tons per acre if you're in those kind of systems, okay? If you look at those Sauterne, you not only just look at the numbers, okay? Less than 10 hectoliters per hectare. You don't need to memorize that number for Chateau Yquem. But you need to have a concept that that is extremely low yield. And why is that? It is because the vineyard management options for producing those kind of botrytis grapes and for botrytis sweet wines, they need to select those kind of grapes. It's hard to get nicely botrytis grapes, and that is why the yield is naturally low. Or if you look at certain Pinot Grigio vineyards, the yield could be extremely high, okay? The most exaggerating example is like if you grow Savatiano grapes in Greece for certain wines, like the special Resina wines, right? It could be as high as 250 hectoliters per hectare, as compared to less than 10 hectoliters per hectare of Chateau d'Yquem. It's not about those numbers. It's about you have such high yield. By managing vineyard in those ways, the purpose is not for those kind of high quality but try sweet wine production. The purpose for Sabatiano in Greece is for those kind of massive Resina production. Because for Resina, the flavors are coming from the pine resins rather than the base wines. And that is how you explain such vineyard management, controlling the yield in a certain way in relation to the growing environment, or how they influence the production and the ripening of the grapes. Okay? And the other criteria they have over here is evaluate the vineyard management options and how that can influence the wine's ability to produce wines for different styles, quality, and prices. Here is even higher level of skills, is to evaluate these kind of situations, okay? The pros and cons and many things. So for Diploma, it's mostly all about these kind of explain, evaluate, these kind of higher level skills. Again, without your great foundation level 3 knowledge, it's difficult to do these kind of higher level evaluation and explanation. And during your level 4 studies, you have to think and pay attention to these kind of higher level skills. Let's look at wine business unit. Okay, for example, on page 11, it says types of business engaged in the wine production of wine that you need to learn about. Okay, and for example, they say you need to learn about estate, grower, producer, merchant, cooperatives, etc., etc. Okay. Okay, there's a chat box here says the audio doesn't work fine for certain people. Don't worry, certain people can hear it. I'm gonna record this, okay? So if the audio is not working, please do watch the recording later. Don't worry. Okay, so for wine business unit, there are different types of business, and we have estate grower and all that, okay? The purpose of studying Diploma is not to learn about all these kind of things just by reciting, oh, what is estate, okay? Define this or memorizing this. It's not only about that, okay? It's certainly, when you learn Diploma, it's not about identifying which types of business are more romantic, okay? If at the Diploma level, if you still think that estates always produce better wines than cooperatives, you should really learn and think with good logic. All right, so let's decode that. Oh, thank you, Michael, for typing that. All right, so for decoding that, let's look at the assessment criteria. Evaluate the different types of business engaged in the production of wine. So when you look at these kind of terms to learn, estate grower, cooperatives, it's not only about memorization, it's also about evaluate them, okay? For estate producers, they have pros and cons, okay? For estate, you need to manage a lot of things in your wine business, okay? You need to make a huge Excel spreadsheet for calculating a lot of things. You need to consider a lot of stuff, okay? There are lots of time-consuming, money-consuming stuff if you run an estate. And for cooperatives, okay, don't consider cooperatives are all producing lower quality, high volume wines. Certain cooperatives can produce a lot of premium quality wines if they do it correctly, right? Like the Les Chablisiens, okay, like the cooperatives of Produitore di Barresco, those kind of cooperatives, they are very high quality cooperatives. All right, you need to evaluate them so that during the D2 study, if you learn it online or in the class, they often focus on doing some SWOT analysis for different type of producers, for different types of business. Okay, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You need to constantly practice SWOT analysis in your studies. And also for marketing part, lots of times they want you to practice 5 Ps: product, place, price, promotion, people. And you know what? In the exam, they will ask you questions by analyzing whether or not this candidate can do some SWOT analysis or the 5P discussions, these kind of things. Okay, so that's for wine business as an example. So these, in my mind, are actually pretty difficult units because D1 and D2, they are helping you to establish a good foundation. And you do need to learn and think a lot and practice a lot in D1 and D2 foundation units. In fact, D3, D4, D5, they are actually easier depending how you look at them. Okay? Because in D3, D4, D5, if you look at most learning outcomes, they say, understand how the growing environment, growing options, winemaking, wine law, regulation, business influence the style, quality, and price of the wines. Okay, I'm not reading through all of them, but if you just read them, it's all about understanding those kind of factors and how they influence the style, quality, and prices of the wines. And the assessment criteria says, describe the style, quality, and price of the wines. Describe the growing environment, growing options, winemaking, law, and commerce. Describe those kind of factors. And then use those kind of factors to explain and evaluate their influence on the style, quality, and price of the wines. Anybody saw how many times that I kind of repeat myself? In D3, D4, and D5, lots of assessment criteria and learning outcome are about how those kind of factors you learned in level 3, D1, and D2 influence or contribute to the style, quality, and price of the wines of the world. And the exam, especially the new diploma, they actually provide you a document, a theory guidance saying you need to pay attention to the command verbs in the questions. What are the command verbs in the questions? In diploma exam questions, they will show those kind of words saying, describe these things. Describe is a command verb. Or explain how the factors influence the style, quality of certain wines. Explain is the command word. In the exam, you will also see command verbs like evaluate or compare. And those are just the command verbs that you can see in the assessment criteria. So if you actually look at level 3 specification, and if you compare the level 3 assessment criteria with diploma, they are strikingly similar. In level 3, you sort of need to identify and locate the principal wines of the world and describe the style and quality of the wines. In level 3, the exam already tests you how to identify the style, quality, and price of the wines. And in level 3, if you remember those kind of short written answer questions, how they test you in the exam, they ask you to identify those kind of factors and briefly explain how they influence the style, quality, and price of the wines of the world. In level 3, it's briefly explained. In Diploma, we are explaining them in detail. Okay, so let's use an example of D3. Okay, so on page 12 to page 13 of D3, we have all the principal wine regions listed. Okay, you need to understand a lot of things about those kind of regions, but again, level 3 already provides you lots of knowledge about them. What you need to do is you use and think about those kind of factors in the vineyard, in the winery, in the wine business, and think about how they influence the style quality. Of course, again, I emphasize law and business over here because in Diploma, you really need to have more awareness of the global wine business and market, okay? So the factors to consider for your D3, D4, and D5, they are listed. For example, in D3, they've already listed the factors you need to consider and use them to think about how they influence the style, quality, and price of the wines. Okay, read the page 12 and 13. You'll see all those kind of factors expected. So in your study, I encourage you use those kind of factors as the framework to guide your evaluation, analysis, and the thinking process of how those kind of factors relate to the style, quality, and price of all the wines from all the principal wine regions. So think about them, okay? Give you an example here. Baden, okay? If you just read the textbook or read some online information, okay? I quote this from some website because I cannot just put the textbook information out here, okay? But for lots of textbooks or lots of information out there, they will describe Baden in this way, okay? Baden is the southmost of Germany's wine regions. It has many soils, types, and grape varieties. Nearly half of the vineyards are planted with Burgunder varieties, like Spätburgunder, Grauburgunder, and Weissburgunder. Okay, if you just read, and I say, oh, I read this chapter today, and today I study a lot. Well, at the end of the day, when you study Diploma, you want to ask yourself, did you really study a lot according to the assessment criteria? Actually, if you really want to learn something, it's not only about reading this information about Baden, you also need to think about why and how. For example, I'm thinking why Baden is suitable for planting Burgunder varieties. Why as compared to other parts of Germany, like as compared to the Mosel Valley, why here we can plant quite a lot of Spätburgunder? And how even some of the Spätburgunder, aka the Pinot Noirs in Baden, can achieve the Grand Cru level in Germany, which is the Grosses Gewächs GG level. Right? Think about them. So you describe and think about those kind of wine styles made from Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Riesling. Of course, they plant Riesling over there, and also Müller-Thurgau and all that. And think about the different qualities among them. And you use factors to explain. Oh, because it's the southernmost regions of Germany, so that here it is warmer as compared to regions like Mosel, those kind of places. That is why it's easier for them to ripen even black grape varieties like Spätburgunder. Right? You will also learn that as for certain places, certain parts of Baden, They can even ripen grape varieties like Merlot nowadays. And why is that? Because certain parts of Baden is really located towards the southmost part of Germany, especially towards the more, almost towards the more Italian side, right? So those kind of parts are really warm enough to even ripen Merlot nowadays. Think about those kind of things. All right. So when you learn things, again, in diploma, do not be satisfied just by thinking about things like, oh, I learned this, I learned that. Think about the implications, okay? At this level, you cannot just say hand harvest guarantees high quality and expensive wines, and machine harvest is all cheaper and lower quality wines, right? You need to learn, for example, when you learn about Beaujolais, especially Beaujolais Nouveau, okay? Beaujolais Nouveau is generally inexpensive and basic quality, but they are hand harvested. And why is that? Because they need to do carbonic maceration or semi-carbonic maceration, okay? Think about those things, think about how and why, right? For machine harvest, for Sauvignon Blanc, especially New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc nowadays, okay? Machine harvest can actually guarantee quality, especially if you want those kind of really pronounced passion fruit, those kind of aromas. Think about why and how, okay? Also, machine harvest is crucial to keep the temperature if you want to harvest some grapes at nighttime. It's much quicker. And machine nowadays can even, harvest machine now can even days can chill those kind of grapes, okay? I'm just thinking about things here. I'm not trying to give you the absolute answers, okay? And some people, when they learn certain things, especially as I mentioned, for the more difficult part is you have to be aware of the wine business and wine market more in the diploma studies. Okay, but those kind of things you still need to have the foundation knowledge. For example, if someone or if the exam wants you to comment on the trade structure and the market for Rosé d'Anjou, you do not try to dig out what is Rosé d'Anjou and the market of the Rosé d'Anjou on the website or in your textbook. Because in a lot of cases, the textbook or those kind of resources, they will not give you numbers or they will not give you information on the market of Rosé d'Anjou. Okay? But you will learn the Loire Valley as a whole in D3, and you learn the differences in between estate and négociant in D2, the wine business unit. You will also learn knowledge like the domestic market versus the international market. With those kind of foundation knowledge, you should already be aware of certain classic wine areas, wine regions, or wine countries in the world. Whether or not they rely more heavily on domestic or they rely more heavily on the international market, export market. Or in certain regions, they are more focusing on the estate or cooperatives or négociants, those kind of things. And when you learn Loire Valley, you will instantly get the market concept by having the D2 foundations, because they will briefly describe Loire Valley as a whole is more relying on négociants and is more relying on domestic market for France and within European Union countries or UK nowadays, right? And when you actually read about Rosé d'Anjou, it's the same story. Okay, so that's how you think. And with those kind of learning, you can sort of move on to D6, the independent research assignment, at some point to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding and they even require higher skills on, you evaluate those information out there on a certain topic, and you produce some research assignment with some original thoughts based on the information out there. Okay, so for the diploma, of course, we care about the exam the most, okay? But it is actually not just about exams. I hear some people say, oh, after learning diploma, actually in our daily life or during work, I don't think diploma is that useful. Well, the people who say that is usually because they don't understand the essence of diploma. Actually, in diploma, they already tells you to apply those kind of knowledge you learn into real life situations. But honestly, you only need to describe and explain things well in terms of how those kind of factors influence the style, quality, and price in your exam, and you can pass. You only need to achieve 55% minimum, and that's it. It's not that hard if you follow these kind of criteria. But you do need to spend 1.5 to 2 years, almost every day, every week, think and learn the diploma according to how they describe it in the specification. So the main takeaway for today's are 2 points, right? 1, please try to master level 3 before moving on to your readings on certain chapters in level 4. And also, understanding and following the learning outcomes and assessment criteria, knowing what they expect. Okay? And that's it. Thank you very much. Cheers. And if you have any questions, you can send me email.